we know data is the lifeblood of any enterprise.
Everything that you brought up is super practical.
And I would argue, Maribel, that cloud is still at best a teenager that just learned how to drive.
We learned so much from moving into the cloud.
I was doing multi-cloud stuff in 2012, if you can believe that, and I've got the battle scars to prove it.
You are listening to the AI with Maribel Lopez podcast, or AI with ML. If this is your first time listening, thank you for joining. The AI with Maribel Lopez podcast is brought to you by the Data for Betterment Foundation. This podcast shares the stories of the people behind the new world of data and AI. What are they creating? And why does it matter? If you like this episode, please subscribe so you can easily find the podcast again. You can find the video version of this podcast at youtube.com at AI with Maribel Lopez. You can also share your feedback and ideas with me on X, also known as Twitter, and LinkedIn. All links are in the show notes. Extended show notes, episodes, and transcripts can be found at lopezresearch.com/podcast. I hope you'll enjoy the show. Hello and welcome back to the podcast/videocast. I'm Maribel Lopez, and we are here today to talk about technology. Over the past 6 months, many companies have contacted Lopez Research to ask questions about the best way to embrace AI. And as a result, both Lopez Research and the Data for Betterment Foundation are looking for ways to educate the market on changes in the landscape. And to do this, I usually like to invite guest speakers to talk about what they're seeing in the market and what companies should be thinking about. So to gain more insight into the space, I've invited our lovely friend here, Bobby Allen, who I've spoken to many times. He is the product manager at Google Cloud, and we're going to talk a little bit about how the landscape is evolving. Bobby, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Maribel. Thank you for having me.
Now, I know that everybody's familiar with Google, and business owners are typically familiar with Google Cloud, but just to give people a little level set in the podcast, can you share a little bit about what some of the key AI solutions are that Google Cloud offers to its customers?
I love this question, Maribel, and I want to try to make this accessible for your audience, so I'm not dumping the truck on them. One, Google has a ton of different things.
Right.
I want to answer your question, but I also want to give a little bit of a framework for how we would look at this, okay? So one of the things that we look at in AI is we look at models a whole lot, so that's one of the places we're going to start. And so a lot of how we'll organize this is, what do you want to do with models? It could be something, it could be nothing, but let's start with, if you're someone who wants to build or extend models, right? When we talk about things like model training or fine tuning, you're probably talking about dealing with AI infrastructure. So You're talking about things like GCE, Google Compute Engine, one of the products that I'm responsible for, Google Kubernetes Engine, GKE. You're talking hardware accelerators like GPUs and TPUs. The way that we group a lot of this stuff together is in something we call the AI hypercomputer. If you want to build your own stack of infrastructure for doing model serving or training or inference. So if you're building or extending models, that's your pocket. Those are the things that you're dealing with. On the other hand, if you want to embed models, so you're not trying to build models, you want to kind of pull something off the shelf and embed that in existing applications, you're in the second category around higher level products like Vertex AI. So you want to engage things like enterprise search, you want kind of a MLOps platform, or you want something that's managed that hides some of the complexity so you don't have to deal with infrastructure. You want to leverage models from a Hugging Face or from a model garden. Vertex AI is the thing that you want to focus on. And then we have people that don't want to build, extend, or embed, they want to consume AI. So what does that look like? That could be people that are looking at things like contact center AI. You're in a contact center, you want an AI solution that helps you with agents to deal with your customers better. That could be various flavors of Gemini in Google Cloud, Gemini Code Assist to help with development and coding, things like Gemini Cloud Assist to help with assisted operations. And so those are all things that are valid. And so that's the framework I would look at. Building or extending, you're probably talking infrastructure. Embedding, you're talking a higher level of service that lets you grab models to inject into your applications. And then when you're consuming at the top level, that may be injected into your software development lifecycle or your operations process or something like a contact center that's a full solution that you just deploy to your customers.
I love the way you frame this, Bobby, for a couple of reasons. One, I think it really speaks to the different dynamics that are happening in the market, right? So some people are a little further along in their journey and they want to build their own models. Some people are saying, hey, there's things out there. I just want to figure out how I use them more effectively. Some people are like, hey, I don't even want to touch the model. I just want to have it be a more app-driven, use case-driven use case. And there are different people within organizations that might have different desires for that. And I think where we've gone now that's so interesting is if you go back like a few years ago, everything was a point solution. And it was hard to figure out where to start and how to do anything. And now it's like exactly what you said. If depending on which of those buckets you have, you can just go and there are things that you can buy and get stood up right away, which is such a great place to be in right now as far as AI is concerned. So I know you've seen a lot, and the breadth of the customers in someone like Google is quite large, right? So the whole gamut of industries, sizes, geographies.
Yes.
And I know this is a hard question, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway, because you might have some themes just the way you did for this. And that is, can we spend a little bit of time talking about some of the business benefits you're seeing customers achieve by adopting AI? Because I know there could be a million of them, but what are the early takes that you've seen thus far?
Yep. So I'm going to give you some examples, but again, I want to give a framework, right? So that we can build on the prior question and just give your audience a couple things to think about. So what do I want to do? Do I want to build AI? And so if we think about Google Cloud as a platform, Maribel, that people often use, and you might use another cloud provider, you might use things in a private cloud, but think of the cloud provider as your platform to do something with. Do you want to build AI on your platform? Do you want to build with AI in your software development process, or do you want to use AI? Build AI, build with AI, or use AI. Most of us, in my opinion, Maribel, are going to be using AI more than anything. And in using AI, I think there are 4 I's that we typically bucketize a lot of things into. We want insight, increase, improvement, or innovation. Insight, increase, improvement, or innovation is typically what we're looking at. So how does that play out in terms of some practical ways that people use AI? Employee productivity. There's something that I was looking for previously and I can find it easier. Insight into a 500-page research paper that can now be distilled into something that's a little bit more sustainable. So employee productivity to find or assimilate information faster. Revenue acceleration, better ways to interact with customers. That could be more scaled outreach. That could be more customized content so that customers feel like they're getting a better experience and things are stickier. Content generation, where we're using AI to help us create papers or documents, user guides, examples, compliance. And this is actually one, as interesting as this may not sound on the surface, this is one that we're actually seeing a lot of leverage from. So let me unpack this one a little bit. So you're a bank and there's a new set of Basel requirements that have come through. What if there was a way to use AI to assess how much of my code is out of compliance with the latest version of Basel, and then give me code snippets for how to remediate that? So think about compliance and code remediation and then coverage to make sure you close those gaps all going together. Very popular in financial services. Kind of related to that, assessing technical debt ahead of a modernization exercise. Example here, we're using database X right now, and maybe we're going to go to Postgres. What if I could look at all my queries and decide all the things that are going to break before I make that switch over? Right? Here are cases where business logic is embedded, or I might be using non-standard SQL that's going to break when I go to something more like Postgres. And then 3 other ones that we're seeing: code refactoring. I think we hear about that from coding assistants. Log explanations, which is one that I'm also excited about. Think about being able to troubleshoot faster. You've got very verbose, very detailed explanations about what went wrong. But what if there was a way to get you to root cause analysis faster? What if there was a way to prioritize the signal versus the noise in those logs? This is a notification versus this is a fire that needs to be put out immediately. And then finally, maybe one of the simplest ones is query creation, right? We know data is the lifeblood of any enterprise. And if I could describe in natural language what I'm going for, and AI could turn that intent into the appropriate queries to give me back the data that I want, then I don't have to be a database expert. I can be a data expert. And then now AI brings the answer closer to my question. So those are some of the areas we're seeing people get benefit so far.
You know, the interesting thing about this is, and this AI is so fascinating in a lot of different ways, but everything that you brought up is super practical. Like you can figure out how you can use that today. I think where we started with AI was like, hey, what could we create? What could we do? Like, what
Yes.
amazing new thing, right? And it's like, okay, let's get troubleshooting right. Let's
Mhm.
figure out data dependencies to make sure things don't break when we migrate things, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
These are like ever present problems that we've had. So I really like the direction that we're going with this, that you can see things you can do today. And then, yes, maybe we come up with whole new product lines and revenue streams and other things, but that's an additional thing. It's not something you have to start with today.
Agree.
Now, I am speaking with Google Cloud. And I think one of the assumptions when people think about cloud computing companies is that everything has to be in the public cloud. So I
Correct.
wanted to get your take. You know, some of the things like you mentioned, GKE,
Mhm.
Anthos modernization. So can we
Mhm.
talk a little bit about what happens when you want to run a hybrid environment
Yeah.
and you want to do AI?
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I'm really proud about, Maribel, is that Google is all about choice and openness because we understand that customers have different needs that we can't always anticipate. So we want to give you the option to do what makes sense for your business today and tomorrow. And so you've got some things that are flexible. We don't want you to feel like we guided you down a dead end street that doesn't give you options for later. And so let me also update some of the terminology that we're using. So Anthos has not gone away. But Anthos gets a lot less of the spotlight now. So think of Anthos kind of like electricity. It's there, but we don't talk about it as much. It's kind of behind the walls. You don't talk about it, you talk about what you do with it. But Anthos absolutely kind of powers a lot of the hybrid and multi cloud experiences that Google enables. And so, what does that look like? From a product perspective, something like GKE that I represent partially is something that can be consumed in Google Cloud, in your private cloud, or even at the edge. And so you can enjoy the experience of a managed Kubernetes platform in those different locations, but then that's often paired with another product, GDC, Google Distributed Cloud. So you might consume GKE on GDC, think the product and kind of the location or the paradigm. We absolutely want to let you do that. Now, a couple things that are table stakes here. When we've tried to do it, by the way, for the audience, if you ever look me up on LinkedIn, sometimes I call myself a product manager, but I call myself a cloud therapist. And part of that is because I was doing multi-cloud stuff in 2012, if you can believe that. And I've got the battle scars to prove it. And I know that sometimes people need to lay on the couch and cry first to recover from the last transformation exercise. But part of what's interesting about this is Google is opinionated in the sense that when we tried to have this flexible model before Maribel back in 2012, we tried to base the concept of workload portability and fungibility around VMs. That does not work. Google's stance is that the container is the construct. That's kind of the foundational piece you need to build things on. So a lot of what we're doing is to enable you to move your workloads around in a container. And so that's really kind of the construct that we're leveraging. But what does that look like? Our tooling and our products are going to allow you to start in one paradigm and move to another without having to rewrite it. So you might do Kubernetes on-prem, you might do containers at the edge, you might bring that back to Google Cloud. And if you need to have different things that talk to each other or move those around, that's what we're trying to enable for all workloads, right? And so if we consider also that AI is a subset of modern workloads, then the things that we're doing for containers to support modern workloads also support AI workloads. So if you need to move a containerized application around today, you can easily translate that into moving an AI application or an AI enabled application around tomorrow. So you're not locked in. You've got lots of flexibility running at the edge on-prem, in the cloud, even in other clouds. I'll acknowledge that. We're trying to support all of those things because I feel like we're still figuring out what we don't know yet. And we don't know exactly what we're going to have to support in this new age.
One of the great things about where we are with AI technology is that we learned so much from moving into the cloud in general.
Yeah.
So things that took us years to get to with the move to cloud computing sort of came with AI. So for example, we were at hybrid cloud as a concept for a lot of organizations. And
Yes.
when we moved into AI, there was of course there'll be hybrid AI, right? So that was already a concept that we could port over, for lack of a better term. But I really appreciate the discussion about how we don't know where we want to go exactly moving forward. So we need infrastructures that provide that kind of flexibility so that you don't have to redo all the work over again. It's not such a heavy lift to move from A to B. You can kind of map things, and then if business evolves, you can remap things and do that in a faster, more cost-effective way. And both speed and cost are really important in this at this point. So absolutely. So that ability of having that kind of flexible infrastructure makes a lot of sense to me. Now, obviously, you're pioneers, right? Were you going to say something, Bobby?
I was just going to jump in just for the audience. So I've got two teenagers, so I don't know if that's good or bad for the people listening. I've got a 16 and an 18-year-old. They're delightful. But my personal life paralyzed my professional life in the sense that my son is going to go for his driver's license pretty soon. And I would argue, Maribel, that Cloud is still at best a teenager that just learned how to drive. He's super capable, but needs a lot of guardrails. It's early, to your point, that we don't know a lot of what we need. And I would argue AI, if Cloud is a teenager to learn how to drive, AI is like somewhere between potty training and teething. It's really, really early there. So we need flexibility, and we need to understand that even though something is capable, it still needs guardrails. Like a teenager that needs a parent sitting in the passenger seat while they're learning how to drive. These things are so new that we don't know what we don't know yet. And so having flexibility when it comes to innovation, compliance, one of the things that we're trying to enable at Google is maximizing innovation and minimizing unintended consequences. And sometimes you can only do that if you give people the flexibility to adapt. If you're locking them into a paradigm and they've got to totally rewrite that later, that's discouraging.
Absolutely. And I do appreciate the analogy of children and where we are in the space, because sometimes as technologists, we've been living it and breathing it, and we want it to be farther along than it is. Yes. But we also have to be sensitive to, even if it's great, even if it's as near perfect as it's going to be, organizations need time to transition. Yes. And they need the comfort level to transition. Yes. And we're not in a comfortable place right now, but we're at an extremely interesting, engaging, opportunistic time, right? Yes. Where we can do a lot of things we couldn't do before. And that's actually quite exciting. So having said that, when we think about where Google has been and how many things it's contributed to the AI community, I have to imagine that there were a lot of lessons learned or best practices that you came up with. So I thought maybe you should share some of those lessons that you've learned, best practices in Google Cloud's AI journey that other companies might find valuable.
Yeah, if you'll allow me, Maribel, I want to expand this a little bit beyond just Google Cloud to Alphabet. Because Great. One of the things that's really interesting is we like to say that we drink our own champagne in a lot of cases. So a lot of the things that we apply in cloud are things that we learn from supporting some of the other products that support 1 billion plus users. And so we've had to do some things at scale to support the very consumer facing products. And then we take those lessons and apply those in the business world. So what does that mean, for example? So one of the things that we see, for example, is that Google's been using AI tools for years to solve some challenges at scale. Here are some examples. So when you think about result ranking and speech recognition in Google search, that was powered by AI for years. When you think about things like text, graphic, and speech translation in Google Translate, again, AI, you'll hear a theme in this, right? Searching through things in Google Photos, right? Tying things to faces or places or labels, again, AI. Smart replies and spam classification in Gmail, all AI. 20 million miles of self-driving in Waymo. One that I'm super excited about, given the impact on the planet, reducing cooling energy by 40% in our data centers, driven by AI. Creating a database of over 200 million proteins for AlphaFold, and then video recommendations and better thumbnails in YouTube. So I'm going somewhere with this. My paradigm is, I think it was Arthur Clarke who said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Mm-hmm. And I think what's interesting is we're having this interesting paradigm where things that seem magical before are just technology that's unexplained. And I think that's kind of how AI is. It was not necessarily a different outcome or different experience, but sometimes it's a different level of acceptance and understanding. So AI is just woven into all these different things that we do. And these best practices just kind of become absorbed into the product as something that people just come to expect. Now, what are some of the best practices that come out of that, though? One, whether it's AI powered or not, I think a big kind of at a meta level, not all the way down in the tech, is people need pictures and recipes to maximize the technology. I'm a big food guy, and you can't just give someone an air fryer and let them work it out. You need to show them pictures of the food that came out of the air fryer and some sample recipes so they can maximize it, and they want to experiment then. I think if you prime the pump out there, it is so much more productive because you show people the art of the possible, and then they're going to build on that and do other things that are super exciting. But just taking tech, Maribel, and throwing it over the wall with no context I think is dangerous at times, and I think it's irresponsible at best, because then people can't maximize it. So I think you've got to prime the pump. You got to give folks something they can get started with, and then watch the magic that happens, and then listen to the stories of how customers are actually using the tech, because there may be some unexpected outcomes. I think that Google's had to kind of wrestle with the paradigm of, again, innovation and unintended consequences. So if there's a technology we develop, how are people actually using it? Are there groups that are marginalized or that are missed? There's technology that we've put out and pulled back because, things like facial recognition or colorization, certain groups weren't recognized appropriately, and so we pulled that technology back. So I think what we're learning from our AI journey is one, you have to look at the legal and ethical implications of stuff, not just the tech implications. And I think it's really important to see people's faces. I'm really big on that, right? As opposed to people process technology, I like people process problem or people process challenge. Whose face are you seeing? Are you seeing your grandmother, your aunt, your niece, your child, your neighbor? I think it's really important, and Google's learned this. We have to anchor things in customer empathy and real personas so that we're not just generically putting something out there that someone may use. Who do we think is going to use it? How does that compare to who actually used it? And what are the outcomes that they've experienced? So I could go further, but I think anchoring the tech and people is something that we learn, giving them examples to prime the pump, and then taking feedback, I think, from our customers is a big way to keep incorporating and having a short feedback loop or product feedback loop to make things better and relevant, so we're not just dumping technology over the wall.
I think that customer-led innovation is really important moving forward, both that and anchoring it in the personas, as you mentioned, because we can build amazing things, but yes, we want amazing things to be useful. Right? We want them to gain a opt-in. We want them to change people's businesses, people's lives. And the only way you can do that is to connect it to both problems they have, but also opportunities. And I think we're seeing some of both. And then there are obviously a lot of legal and ethical implications that we have to think about. Sometimes it's just because you can do it, should you do it, right? There's a difference when we think about that. So I like where you're going with that. I shudder to ask this question, but in some ways I feel I'd be remiss if I didn't, since I'm talking to Google. And this is, what are some of the future trends in AI that enterprise buyers should be aware of? I mean, I know that in some ways, everything in AI is partially future, but I'm sure there are other things that you're thinking about that people should be looking forward to.
So there are a couple particular things, and again, this is my opinion. I don't speak for all of Google, but just some of what we're seeing as we talk to customers and partners. One, I think that we're going to see a shift from model training to model inference. Not for everyone, but I think there's going to be and again, to come get the audience members who may feel left behind, training versus inference is moving AI from the practice field to the game. So we're not just training, we're actually putting it in the game. We're expecting it to score some points and be productive, right? And so I think we're going to do that partly because we're not maximizing everything that the current models can do today. And so do we need to go train something that new when we're not getting all the mileage and all the output out? Because there's so much power, Maribel, in these large language models in particular. I think there's more that we're leaving on the table. And I think folks are realizing that now. So I think there'll be a big shift, number one there. Number two, kind of related to that, I think we're going to see enterprises capturing model prompts almost the way we capture code, where we might start to version that. So this is the way we achieve this outcome. You're going to access this model and pose this question this way. And I think that those will be things that we start to version and distribute almost the way that we do code, or even things like infrastructure as code, right? If you want this outcome, you want to hit this model and ask it this way, I think we're going to start to do that. I think that we're also going to concede that AI is better at optimizing infrastructure than we are. We've been hugging servers physically and virtually for a long time, Maribel, and yet we still know that there's a lot of waste in cloud. I want to give you a stat for your users. We know that NLP, natural language processing, is kind of one of the early precursors to LLMs in a lot of ways. The sobering stat to me, Maribel, is that training one natural language processing model is the equivalent of 125 round trips from New York to Beijing in terms of the environmental impact.
Yeah.
So it is imperative that we can't create this future that's great technologically and horrible ecologically for our children. And so to me, we need to just concede that it's over, that even the most well-intended humans leave things on that we forget to turn off. We don't right size things. We don't resize things. We need to just allow AI to take a bigger role in that, because there's some predictive things that are just better than us having the best intentions that don't always come to bear. Two more I'll give the audience, and then I'd love to get your thoughts and have some more conversation. I think AI model governance is going to become a thing. And here's what I mean by this. If you're an enterprise company, a bank, an insurance company, a retailer, et cetera, I think we're going to have a paradigm where you're trying a broad set, but using a limited set at scale. I think the average enterprise does not want the developers necessarily having access to 200 different models. They want a trusted group of people, enterprise architects, principals, et cetera, to test drive some models and then expose the ones that are vetted to a larger group of people. And I think what we're also going to see related to that is, as opposed to asking for model brands, we're asked for model outcomes. I think we're going to have model abstraction in the enterprises as well, where you may not be asking for a model by name. You're going to say, I need a model that does X. That smaller group, like that architectural review board or the enterprise architects, will have vetted that. And they'll say, you access this model or this endpoint or this API to get this outcome. And I believe, Maribel, people may not even know what model powers that anymore, because they might hide that level of complexity. This is the model they're using today, and then they might snap in a different model tomorrow, a different version of the same model or a different model that achieves the outcome better or faster. And this is related to kind of the next point. Model evaluation won't just be good or bad. Model evaluation will have specific vectors that we look at: accuracy, performance, safety, consistency, liability. What data was this trained on? Do we agree with the ethic thesis of how this data got into the model? Communication and translation. How difficult is it to turn my intent into the appropriate outcome? And I'll go back to the consistency one just to make sure we're clear. There are times where we want our users to have a consistent experience on different devices. So you might go to a website for a certain company and you want an experience that you want to be similar in the car or on the phone or on that device. Is there a lightweight version of that model that can be deployed to the phone or the car, similar to the cloud version that powers what's on the website? So I think all of those are going to be things that we start to see as as trends in the enterprise in the future. Ultimately, though, I think as a meta point, what I think we're seeing is people are going to want to figure out how to move from innovation to production. Try it out quickly, then do it at scale safely. That's going to be a continuum we see. So try it out, MVP, smaller group, and then how do we turn that into something that most people can consume at scale?
You touched on so many points. I'm going to see if I can kind of riff off of some of them, okay. Because I believe that we're very much aligned in terms of how we think about things. So I had an even simpler framework for... So first of all, I would say people went from thinking that there was just one or two models to there being thousands of models, yes, which created immediate fear of how do I move forward into the future with so many options. There's just too many choices, right? The tyranny of too much. So I think that model evaluation is going to be very important. I think model abstraction, which is what you were getting at, is like, that is going to be a great thing. At some point, I'm not going to want to know, but I am going to want some tools that are with the provider I'm working with that will try to help me figure out, in the background, what should go where. And I base those a lot on how fast do I need it? How accurate do I need it? At what cost do I need it at? Not all problems are created equal in terms of what you would need the model to do. Accuracy level, if I'm doing customer sentiment, maybe 90% accuracy level is good enough. Right. If I'm trying to detect that you have cancer, I'd probably want it to be closer to 99, right? Exactly. So those are very different vectors. Do I need it this week? Do I need it in 30 seconds, right? That has a lot of difference in terms of what size, where I run the model, what sustainability goals do I have around it. So I think that we will need to work with companies that provide tools to help us figure out, based on the different use cases, which models we should be working with. And that's going to be an issue. The governance point. So I've done quite a few podcasts on governance because I think that governance is going to have a moment. And the reason I think governance is going to have a moment is governance and security are actually dovetailing each other. There's a tremendous amount of risk. There's data protection risk, there's brand risk, there's actually harmful things could happen to people if we don't have governance in place. Yes. So instead of it just being one of those things that, there was a group in the corner that worked on governance and created some policies that nobody cared about, right? That's kind of how we thought about governance, similar to how we used to think about network management. It was like a necessary evil, but nobody really cared about it. Right. I think that's moving into a board level conversation. Yes. So we're having a lot more discussion about that. And particularly in the global world stage, yes. The EU AI Act is a really good first indication of what's happening in the governance world. So I'm extremely excited to see how those two things come together so that we have more secure and more ethical AI. So I think that's a big trend. Yes. I think what you mentioned with sustainability, sometimes when you have a hammer, everything is a nail. Yes. And when you think about it, what you need is a toolbox. You need screwdrivers and wrenches and other things. And this is how I feel about when do you use AI? What do you use AI for? And part of that is there are many different ways you could accomplish something, and not everything has to be AI. So I think organizations are working their way through when is it the right time to interject AI, and what is the multiple costs? There's a hard dollar cost, there's a sustainability cost, there's also ethics and privacy costs that we have to think about as well, right? So yes, I could take large volumes of data, video data from everywhere, and there's a cost associated with that. There's also privacy issues associated with that. So there's things that were going on. So I think you and I are very much aligned in terms of what the future is. I think we're moving out of model myopia, which was something that we were talking a lot about, where it's all about the model, nothing mattered but the model. Yes. And now we're switching to what's the use case? What's the return on that? How do we productize and scale something in an organization? Yes. Still a long way to go in terms of having all the tools and processes for that, but that's really exciting, right? We're going to do it hopefully better. I hope that this is an opportunity to not just recreate, but to really truly reinvent and reimagine how we do things. And if we can do that, I think it'll be super powerful for what we can do moving forward.
I think it's huge, Maribel. I think I'll share just something that I've had as a thought for a while. Our expectations of AI are sometimes too high, and our expectations of ourselves are too low. So here's how I've said it in other thoughts before. AI is not the thing. AI is the thing lowercase that makes the thing uppercase better. It's not the thing. It's the thing that makes the thing better. So if this were food, AI is not the dish. AI is the sauce or the spice that makes the dish better. And so
or the cooking technique or whatever. Yeah.
It's not the thing. And so the thing is typically the application or an application or a platform. But the thing ultimately from a customer perspective is a way to solve that problem or that challenge, right? People, process, problem. That's what matters to people. How are we using AI to accelerate or complement the way we're solving a real problem for them? And if we fall in love with just the models, if we fall in love with all this AI terminology and don't make someone's life better somehow, I think that we've missed it. I think we've got to focus on people, seeing someone's face, making something better, reducing toil, reducing friction. If we do that, then I think that we're going to be fine.
Well, I can think of no better spot to stop on than making the world better by focusing on people and doing the right thing and solving problems. Bobby, thank you for your time and attention. And I'm so excited to see what you build next and how you help people move through some interesting and challenging times. Thanks again.
Thank you, Maribel.
Thank you for listening. Additional content can be found at lopezresearch.com/podcasts. Until next time, wishing you all the best.